On the K.GE Reads website, you can find a diagram showing about 20 individual aspects to this machine. I will cover those now, plus a couple of extras that have since been added to the design since the drawing was made. We're going to close up now onto the machine so that I can show you the individual components. Here is the computer design template, which is marked A on the diagram on the website. Here is the wheel, which is marked B, which follows the contour of the template. C is the large component here, the sliding and lifting arm which has attached to it. D, the circular scraping blade. And E, the adjustable spring that keeps the reed in contact with the plaque, or less so if the user chooses to take more cane from the back of the reed. I'll explain more about that later. Here is the plaque, marked F on the diagram, on which the blank reed is placed, and here is the rotating clamp that holds the reed firmly in place. This spoke here is a device to keep the sliding arm locked in storage or travelling, which protects the blade and the plaque, marked H on the diagram. This small ring at its base, when slid down, keeps the spoke upright, and it fits into this hole under the sliding arm here. When you slide the ring up, the spoke lies flat, like this. Next, we have the rotating lever here, which moves this entire part here from side to side as the reed is scraped, allowing the wheel to cover all parts of the template, little by little. Now we come to some of the adjustable parts of the machine. This screw adjusts the height of the wheel for controlling primarily the thickness of the scrape, marked M on the diagram on the website. And this screw nearby controls the tension of the spring I mentioned earlier, under here by the blade. See the spring there. When you wish to take a little more from the back of the scrape, you can release the screw, thus decreasing the tension of the spring and allowing the reed to come a little away from the plaque, for the blade to cut more cane from the back. Again, I'll demonstrate this when I scrape a reed for you to see in a minute. The next adjustable component that I'm going to show you is what makes this machine very unique, and it's the fact that we can actually change the length of the tip. Now the way we do that is we have to release this screw here, getting Kishun to help me here. The next thing we have to do is we have to release this lock here with an Allen key. Once that's been released, then we can actually move the position of this compartment here with an Allen key. By turning it clockwise, we can actually lengthen the tip by moving it towards me, away from Kishun. And by turning it the other way, we're actually shortening the tip. But by doing that, we're actually going to have to make a few adjustments. And if you turn the machine, we'll show you.
Yeah, if you're going to lengthening the tip, then this wheel is going to be forward, then you have to make this screw go inside.
Okay, so turning it clockwise,
Yeah, turning it clockwise.
will actually shorten the distance that the movable arm can travel, which means it doesn't go as far on the plaque.
Yeah.
And turning it the other direction, as in, oh, you have to release with the lock. Turning it the other direction will allow the movable arm to go further along the plaque, up to 1 millimeter past the line. That's the limit.
Yeah.
We have to be careful not to go any further past that, because then there's danger of the blade going into the plaque, which can damage the blade. So we can adjust that from the front by this screw here, firstly releasing that and moving it, and then we can adjust it at the back through this rotatable lock. You can just see he's released it there, and then you can move the middle bit to expand, or moving it back, shorten it. Then once you've locked that in again, the movement of the arm has been limited. Okay, and the other thing we have to watch out for is, of course, that the wheel fits onto this compartment here, which we'll show at a later date. That will actually lengthen the scrape. We'll show that in a minute. And so you have to make sure that the wheel, when placed, is actually just in front of the compartment, that it's not leaning on that mould there. Okay? Now that we've turned the machine around, we'll go back to what I just touched on before, and that is we can actually lengthen the scrape of the reed by releasing this screw here. Then we have a movable mould, if you can see that moving backwards or forwards. Moving that will actually allow you to change the length of the scrape. So of course moving it back will increase the length of the scrape, and moving it forward will minimise the length of the scrape. Okay. Oh, well,
Yeah.
the next thing I'd like to show you is also something very unique to this machine, and that's the blade, which can be very easily changed by turning this screw here. Now the fact that it's a round blade makes it very easy to change. You just release the screw and turn a little bit towards you, away from you. Now what I recommend is, once you've made a couple of reeds, before you change the blade, putting a black mark on it, then every time that you change it, you know which part has been used and which part hasn't. Then Kishun's just going to tighten it there. Of course, I always recommend, once you've changed the blade, it's always best to set the thickness to much thicker before you try some reeds. That's with this one here that we showed you before, to make sure that the blade does not enter the plaque. Okay, the next thing we'd like to show you is another thing which is very unique. As we all use very different gouges, Kishun has built in a mechanism here which will allow us to change the angle of the template. This is the template here, and you can see it sitting there. This Allen key, which is controlled through the bottom, if you lift up the machine, you can see you can control it by putting it through that hole there. That's it there. And he changes it. Now lifting up the angle will be for people who are using a thicker gouge. So if somebody's gouging at 58, 59, even 60, as in 0.6 of a millimetre, you'll need an increased angle. And somebody who's gouging a very thin cane, so 0.55, 56, 57, can actually lower. By turning it anti-clockwise, this will lower the angle of the template and accommodate for those who are gouging thinner. So Kishun, as you mentioned earlier, at the moment you've got two different types of templates. You've got the French and the German.
Yes.
Knowing you, there'll probably be a lot more coming up soon. But let's just show everyone how easy it is to remove the template. So you basically have to release, firstly, this screw here, and that one at the back. Note that it's the two screws on the far extreme. The one that's in the middle there, as we showed you earlier on, actually alterates the length of the scrape. And the other template is just placed on here and screwed back on. But before you screw it back on, we'll just talk a little bit about this component here. Of course, it does look very easy changing the templates, but it is actually a very, very delicate issue. And the problem when you change the template is not only that it has to be aligned, but it has to really sit flat. Otherwise, it doesn't take off the same amount of cane from both sides. And so, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you've done with this element here is you've actually elevated one side. It's at a slant. So if you turn it by the Allen key, it's going to be correcting, lifting one side.
Lifting one side and slightly up.
Okay, so
and
for
if
example,
the one side is taking more cane off.
Yes.
So you need to lifting the one side slightly up.
So the way it's set up here, it's helping if it's taking too much from the right side, you can adjust it, and if it's too much from the left side, you just change the position. I hope you're getting that on camera. You can change the position and screw it from the other side so it's slanting up, and that way one can always adjust that it's sitting flat. And we should probably also mention that although it looks...
So only for someone who is confident.
Yes, although it looks incredibly easy,
Yeah.
it is actually an extremely sensitive issue. So if you're not too familiar with a machine, we actually really do recommend that you take it to an expert to do that. But just to show how easy it can be when you are an expert, do you just want to show us how easy it is to put the template back on, as in the other template? So we've changed the template, and the screws are still in the old template, and they're just screwed back on, and then we have to do the fine adjustments. But like I said, if you're not familiar with the machine, it's better that an expert helps you, because the alignment of the sides, as in making sure that both sides have the same thickness, it's a really important part of getting the reed to work. So there we go. There's another one of the interchangeable components which you've built in here.
Yes.
Okay, we're all done. Great. Okay, Kashuns, now in this troubleshooting segment, we're going to have a look at the adjusting the thickness
Yes.
of the reed, and that's done through this screw here. So basically, if we want a thicker scrape, we have to turn it. I suppose first we have to unlock it here.
Yes.
Unlock it, and a thicker scrape will be turning it to the plus. Hopefully you can see that with the camera. There's a plus and there's a minus. Making it thinner will be turning it in direction minus. We recommend that the changes are always very minimal to avoid too great steps. There's danger of the blade getting into the plaque. It's also, can you just tell us about what the maximum parameters are in the setup there? If you've got quite a hard piece of cane, it's
you
good
set to maybe 0.05 to 0.06. It's as thin as you can get this thing to 0.05.
Yeah. And that's actually probably the recommendable limit. I wouldn't. We wouldn't really go any lower than that. That's for harder cane. Going any lower than that, as I mentioned before, propels the danger of the blade actually going into the plaque, which will damage it. And of course, so if you've got a thinner or a lighter piece of cane, and you want a thicker tip.
Thick tip you can between the 0.08 to 10.
Okay, so there's a span of between 5 to 10.
Yeah.
You wouldn't want a thicker tip than 10, and you wouldn't want a thinner tip than 5.
Yeah.
That's basically everything as far as the thickness.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we're going to look at here is how we can take more or less cane from the back of the reed without adjusting the overall thickness of the reed. This here, I believe, is how we can adjust that.
Yes.
So the more we actually screw it down,
There's more tension.
there's more tension. Okay, so it takes less off the back of the reed. Yep. And screwing it all the way up will take more from the back of the reed. Okay, and perhaps it's also worth mentioning, if for some reason it's all the way up the top and you're still not happy with the amount of cane it's taking off at the back, I suppose that will be more the case when people have a very, very thin gouge.
Yes.
That can still be counteracted by actually this here. Let's keep it the Allen key. I hope the camera can see that.
The middle part of the Allen key, the screw, put it lower. This template.
It will lower the template overall, which will allow more cane to be taken off
from the back.
From the back. And I suppose, well, the reverse is also, if you feel as if it's taking off too much cane from the back, even though you've adjusted the spring, you can actually raise it by turning the Allen key in the opposite direction. Yeah.